there, listeners. Are you feeling the weight of the world? Well, you're not alone. The U.S. Surgeon General says nearly 50% of parents are overwhelmed by stress. And guess what? It's affecting us all. Just last year, we heard about an epidemic of loneliness hitting half our population, especially young adults. But there's hope. I'm Scarlett Lewis, founder of the Choose Love movement. We're dedicated to your safety, health, and well-being with proactive mental health strategies. Imagine a life where stress and loneliness are replaced by joy and connection. We've already reached millions with essential life skills to prevent violence, substance abuse, and mental illness. Want to join this life-changing movement? It's easy. Visit chooselovemovement.org today. Become a member, spread the word, and access our free resources. Together, we can create a loving, supportive community. Remember, all the nurturing, healing love you give comes back to you tenfold. Thank you for choosing love.
I choose love. I choose love.
Hey everybody, my name's Scarlett Lewis and I am the founder of the Choose Love movement. Welcome to the Choose Love podcast, where we have incredible guests that will inspire and motivate you to be, feel, and do better. And we have an incredible person, somebody that I just completely admire and respect today. I'm so excited to be able to interview her. Her name is JoAnn Mitchell. And she is an education reform leader and the founder and CEO of Mission Achievement and Success, MAS, Charter Schools, an organization whose mission is to prepare underserved students to be successful in college and in life by providing a rigorous college preparatory program in a safe and engaging learning environment. JoAnn's results are incredible, everyone, with an unprecedented 100% graduation rate. JoAnn possesses over 30 years of educational leadership and education reform experience, including as a school founder, district administrator, school psychologist, and classroom teacher. She has a master's and she's an education specialist in school psychology and her certificate of advanced study in school administration. Recognized by Success Magazine as a 2022 Woman of Influence, JoAnn has been the focus of numerous news and feature articles for her pioneering efforts and extraordinary results. JoAnn was one of the very first early adopters of the Choose Love curriculum for over, I'm going to say it, 10 years now, and has been choosing love in her school, now schools, since the day we released the curriculum in 2014. They're now a certified Choose Love school, which means they prioritize character and social emotional development. You know, very dear to my heart. JoAnn was a Yaz Prize semifinalist out of 2,700 applicants that recognizes sustainable, transformational, outstanding educational leaders by the Center for Education Reform in partnership with Forbes. Under JoAnn's leadership, MAS's literacy and math achievement rates are among the highest in the state. In recognition of its top 25% ranking in the state, MAS has consistently been designated as either an A-rated or spotlight school by the New Mexico Public Education Department. It is one of only a handful of schools in New Mexico to ever receive this designation while engaging a traditionally disadvantaged and impoverished student demographic. MAS currently serves more than 2,200 students in grades pre-K through 12 at 2 campuses in Albuquerque, New Mexico. JoAnn just launched a new business, Transformational Journeys, which serves individuals facing challenges like depression, anxiety, trauma, substance abuse, grief, and relational issues. And we're going to hear more about this today. JoAnn is someone, and I said it before, but I'm going to say it again. She's one of my absolute favorite people on the earth. I admire and respect her so much. She is really the most amazing administrator that I've ever had the privilege of working alongside. She personally trains her staff in the latest neuroscience and with techniques that most individuals have never heard of. She's absolutely amazing. It's like we're cut from the same cloth, JoAnn. JoAnn is a modern day Wonder Woman, and I'm so excited to have you on our show.
What an intro.
Well, I mean
I don't know what to say now.
I mean it. You're
Thanks,
amazing.
Scarlett.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I can say that, but the data proves it. And you're just, consistently outperforming just about everyone. And it's amazing. And so I'm so excited to kind of delve into obviously what you're doing now with transformational journeys, but how you do what you do in the charter schools that you founded and have brought along, and just hearing a little bit about your journey, and giving people that are listening, mostly educators, some inspiration and guidance.
Yeah, where do I start? Well, again, thank you for the intro. And I often start with my backstory. So whether we're talking about the school or the counseling agency, I talk a little bit about my backstory and how it got me here. So I'll just give you a little bit of that, and that lays a foundation for how both came to be.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
I was born upstate New York, and born into poverty. My parents were teen parents. They dropped out of high school, and so didn't have the easiest upbringing, both, like with the poverty issues, right, and the challenges that go with that. And then there was a lot of abuse in the home, right, growing up. So I tell people, half joking but serious, right? That I mean, you'd be beaten in my house for not doing well in school. So by accident, I did really, really well academically, and we were fortunate. We went to a private school. I know you might think, well, you said that you lived in poverty, but we were the charity of the church. So I had a good foundational education, though. I had a really good education, and I kind of became a bit of a perfectionist and an overachiever as a child, right? So I did really well in school, and going to college was really less of something that people had geared me for and said, you need to go to college, like you're so smart. I really didn't have that person growing up, or in school settings who championed, like, for me to go there. It was really more of an escape, just knowing that there had to be more and I had to get out of what I was surrounded by. So went to college, and I really had no idea what I was going to do when I got there. It was, again, just an escape. And so while I was in college, I took psychology classes, and I mean, the entry level classes that you take as core requirements. And I fell in love with psychology, and it really helped me to make sense of a lot of things that didn't make sense growing up. When you grow up around things that just deep down at the core of who you are, you know that that's not normal, right? But you don't have another worldview. Like, it just doesn't feel right. So when I took the psychology courses, I found that it was the beginning of, like, a lot of healing for me. And at that time, I really debated on going into counseling, like to be a counselor, but I just knew there was so much from my past that I was trying to forget. And I was trying to not remember, that I didn't feel like I could probably do it at the time, because I thought, I don't know if I can hear about other people's traumas and their pains, because I was doing everything I could to forget my own, right? So
Interesting.
I ended up on the path of education. I mean, it's not that I didn't enjoy education and stuff as well. I, put my stuffed animals in chairs when I was a kid and would teach them. And, I was the older of the girls in my family. We had a family of four, and, so you play school and things like that. I'd be the teacher, right? So education, I enjoyed that as well, but I really love the psychology stuff. So I started my path in education, and I got married right out of college, and we moved. He was a semi-professional athlete at the time, so we moved. We were in Florida, we were in Georgia. That's how we came to New Mexico. He was a hockey player, and I worked at all Title I schools, like, so schools that serve underserved students and communities, and loved the work. And I saw so much of myself in the kids that I worked with. The difference that I saw was that, unlike a lot of first generation students, so I'm a first generation high school graduate, first generation college graduate. And usually the profile for folks like me is that generally kids like myself would go to college, and you're underprepared if you can even get into college. Like, you don't tend to have the academic skills. And I didn't kind of fall into that statistic, right? I actually had the skills. I didn't understand how college worked. That's another whole story for another podcast. But I but I did well academically. I wasn't struggling. And so anyhow, when I went to Title I schools, I just saw so much of what I grew up around, and I saw myself in kids. And so it really ignited a passion because I saw what education did for my life. I tell people that if you saw where I came from and you saw me today, my life is hardly recognizable, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I wanted to be able to give that back to other kids through education. And so while the Title I schools were initially, because those were where the openings were, I didn't even know what a Title I school was. It's just as you looked for a job, those were the schools that were hiring, right? And but then it became a choice after that once I learned what Title I schools were. And as we moved around the country for his career, I would intentionally seek out schools that served underserved students. And so anyhow, like kind of fast forward, like, I worked as a classroom teacher. I eventually worked as a school psychologist. So I was still able to tap into the psychology part. And then on the school side of things, I would always infuse the social, emotional, like those soft skills. People call them different things, right? Those grit skills, the soft skills, whatever you want to call it, right? I always infused that because I found that it was the education alone. It didn't get me where I was going. It was the other stuff. And then I also started to recognize, like, as I journeyed in my educational journey, that no amount of degrees. I had a bachelor's, a master's, a specialist, an advanced study certificate, and yet I was still navigating challenging relationships. And because the poverty, I might have broken through economic poverty, but I hadn't quite broken the poverty of the mind, right? The poverty of the limited thinking that I don't deserve this, like, who am I kidding? Like, this is the best that it's gonna be, right? I can't rebound after a divorce, or you name whatever the thought was, right? And so I really started to, I stumbled into Dr. Joe's work. I'd always been, I know Scarlett, we share a lot of the same interests in authors, the Wayne Dyers and the Louise Hayes
Yeah, we
and then I
do.
discovered Dr. Joe's work, and that was a game changer for me.
And that's Dr. Joe Dispenza.
That's correct. Yeah. And then I started to, like, really do a lot of self work. And then I really went to the next level of trying to infuse that work into the schools. And that's about the time, Scarlett, that you and I met. Is, I was, we were starting to bring the Choose Love in. I was really deeply into the Dr. Joe work, but trying to figure out how do I weave this in. And so anyhow, fast forward, I eventually got to the point where I was bringing this really deeply into schools, and then I went full speed ahead and got my counselor's license in New Mexico. I had my school psychology license, so I just had to kind of add a couple of courses to get an independent license as a counselor here in New Mexico, and opened up a counseling agency because I have found that the two go so hand in hand. I believe that you can't do education without educating on the social emotional pieces. And I also don't believe that you can completely do counseling with just talking to people. I think that there's a huge educational component to counseling, of helping to provide skills and tools that people don't have. And I see that as much of an educational piece as anything. So I brought the two worlds together, if you will, but in two separate arenas. And probably answering all the questions before you get a chance to ask
No,
them.
I think it's fascinating. And I think that it's a different way to look at counseling. I don't think that that is the way that most people look at therapy. They look at it like, they're going in and they have an issue and they're going to talk about the issue until they resolve it. But I don't think people often go in with the expectation that you're going to be learning skills and tools that are going to help you not only with that issue, skills and tools that you don't have. That's why you're in the therapist's office, but they're going to help you going forward. And that's what you're talking about, merging that education with the counseling, which I think is it's needed. And that's where we're going with the whole field. It has to be.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So that's where I am present day. I still run the schools, love that. And then I have a counseling agency, and I've brought on a few therapists. And so I know a lot of folks ask, like, how do you do both? And are you going to leave one eventually? it's not my intention. I don't feel like I have to choose. I feel like I can do both, right? I'm very passionate about both, so it's my intention to continue to do both.
So what makes transformational journeys unique in its class? I mean, other than I love this whole concept of uniting the education piece. And by the way, what I love about you, JoAnn, is that you're up in front of the school actually giving this training yourself. You're actually one of only 100 certified trainers for the Joe Dispenza work. And Joe Dispenza work, by the way, also informed Choose Love. And that is very heavy with the neuroscience of the mind, the power of our thoughts and intentions, how we shape not only our reality, but our future. And I have benefited, by the way, of sitting in your sessions with your entire school, with both schools and all the educators in there. I've never seen that, JoAnn, in any other school. And I think it's awesome. I know you're also bringing in heart math, which is, you know, also so incredible and just very research and science based. So tell me how this transformational journeys, I mean, I know that I say like, this is so needed to take the next step. I mean, you teach it in schools, but there are already kids that haven't had these skills and tools, and they're in, you know, a relatively dark place, and they need this extra help. How would you articulate that transformational journeys is different than just, you know, going out to seeking counseling elsewhere?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that would make us different is really the focus on the educational part, right? It's specifically around like the neuroscience of everything. I would say if you had to classify the agency as like, what is the modality, right? Like the counseling modality, I would say it falls really in line with cognitive behavioral, right?
Absolutely.
So cognitive behavioral obviously focuses on like the thoughts, the feelings, like, you know, the actions, the behaviors, right? And I would say that, I mean, you know this as well, that Dr. Joe's work and stuff is got real heavy basis to that with the neuroscience part. I would say the part that makes us really different, because there's lots of places out there that do cognitive behavioral therapy, right? But I think it's the explicit teaching, right? From the heart math, from the Dr. Joe stuff, right? To me, the educational piece on the breath. Why does breathing matter? Right? We could tell, and I think anybody who's been in a therapist's office knows that one of the tools that people tell you is breathe, breathe. But when you don't understand why you're doing it, sometimes that just feels like such a shallow, you know, a response to somebody who's in crisis or stressed out. Like, breathe. I don't want to breathe. Right? I
Yeah,
have a
why you're
problem right
doing it
now.
and what the benefits are to you.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And you do this a lot, Scarlett, when you're presenting, right? Like you go over why all these things. How does courage serve you? How does gratitude serve you? And you talk about it from a neuroscience standpoint, right? How does it impact the body? And so I think that rather than being something that's just feel good and like, oh, she's got like really great energy, she's a nice person, right? That it's like, yeah, that and this stuff really, there is like science behind why this works, right? And so I think that that's one thing that is a real separator, is helping people understand how it works, why it works, and how it impacts you. What does stress do to the body over time? And when people understand that, I think the buy-in shifts. This is what I hear from clients too, like, right? Like once they understand the why, right? Even teachers teaching the Joe Dispenza stuff, teaching the heart math, the Choose Love in the school, once they understand the why we do it, you know, how it works, the buy-in to me is just next level at that point in time, because you understand that this is so beneficial for me, it's beneficial for the people around me. So back to your original question, like what makes us different? I would really stand behind that it's the educational approach to the work that we do. So rather than just helping somebody fix the immediate problem or listen to somebody vent, it's really explicitly like teaching and providing tools so that people get to a place that eventually they have the tools. I always tell people we are having a human experience, right? You're going to have challenges. Like it's kind of part of the human experience, right? You're going to have traffic, you're going to have loss, right? You're going to have unexpected bill. I mean, those things are just going to happen. That's not a negative self-fulfilling prophecy. It's called life, right? But we have to have the tools to navigate those things. And I think that the big part of what we do is teach tools, but like really, really embedding the science behind it so that people have tools that they can pull out and use in life.
Yeah. And these are skills and tools, those embedded in Choose Love and Joe Dispenza and Heart Math, that can be woven into any situation. So you've got probably what are the types of things that you see in your practice, and is there anything that sticks out to you that you're seeing more of now? And it's I'm sure it's fascinating for those going through your counseling to actually see how they can populate their tool belt, and that it not only helps with the situation that they're in, but it's now they're gonna have the skills and tools forever to be able to handle anything that comes their way.
That's right.
Yeah.
I would say, as far as like what I see coming my way, the biggest one is anxiety. And I say anxiety with like the air quotes, right?
Yep.
Because
Yep.
I'll leave that for a second, just lingering.
Yep.
Anxiety, grief, folks who have experienced loss,
Yep.
depression, substance abuse issues, a lot of alcohol abuse issues, and a lot of relational challenges, interpersonal issues. So I would say if I had to like just kind of give the high level ones, that would be the area. But I say anxiety is kind of the overarching umbrella, because if every person who presents, I would say, I shouldn't say every, but nearly every person, that anxiety umbrella holds the spokes together, right? So it might be anxiety, and then there's grief, and there's also some substance abuse, and there's also some loss, and there's also, right. So but I tend to find that people present, and they'll present with the anxiety, how they feel inside, the amped up behavior, the nonstop racing thoughts, right? The thoughts that won't stop, like the fatalistic thinking, like that is usually always the presenting thing. And then when we start to kind of like dig in, it could be that there's substance abuse underneath all of it. It could be that there was a loss a few years ago and it's just exacerbated. But that's where the cognitive behavioral stuff comes in, right? Because regardless of what the issue is, it all starts with a thought, right? It's the same thing it all starts with a thought, right? And the thought that we technically choose, although a lot of people have given up the power of choice and they're running off a program, right? So there's a program playing in the background that they're not even aware of anymore. So yes, there is a choice, but they've given up that choice and they've let the button hit play, and they just run that same program day in and day out. But it goes back to the thoughts.
Yeah. Out of habit and memory.
Yep.
They don't even know that they're doing it, and they have to be reminded that they do have a choice. That's our superpower as human beings. And that anxiety piece is so interesting, because anxiety is fear of the future. And of course, where does anxiety live? But in our heads.
Right.
It's not a blood test. It's, you know what I mean? It's literally as thoughts in our heads, and you can change a thought.
Right.
So what you're saying makes so much sense. And I would even say, gee, it's so simple. It's pretty simple, right? But simple, I also say simple isn't always easy. And so, you can get somebody in your office, and I mean, you can get a child in your classroom too, and you
Right.
teach them this. How do you help cultivate the foundation so that the child is, and by the way, not just kids, but educators too, because what you're teaching and Choose Love is teaching is for all ages and stages. And it's really a common language and a universal learning. So how do you till the soil, fertilize the soil to actually make it stick? Like, it's one thing I can come in and inspire and motivate, and maybe even role model a little bit for what this looks like. And you've had a really hard upbringing, and I went through a really hard time in my life. And we do this stuff. We live this stuff every single day. But it takes a lot of work. And I think what people probably don't understand is that we do it every day. You know, you and I have been on so many calls supporting one another. I'm telling you about the difficult things that are happening, the mistakes that I've made. You're helping me. And so how do you get people to actually buy in and then actually do the work?
So to me, the best way to do it is the power of community. I think you do such a remarkable job with your Choose Love community, right? Dr. Joe does an amazing job with his Dr. Joe community, right? Heart Math and the Heart Math community. And as you know, those communities all like intertwine with each other, right? Because it's that power of the collective, right? When we brought this to the school, you know this, Scarlett, because you know you presented to the school staff numerous times.
Yes.
But as we spread the message within the whole school community, instead of one person trying to champion, right, you get everybody champion. And it's so much easier when you have that energy of people kind of lifting each other, because it's not one person who's bringing it, but we all bring it. It's no different in the counseling. Like I encourage like clients when we do work, whenever I work with people individually, I encourage them as much as possible to bring whoever their loved ones into the sessions, right? Because the change process is, I think, easier when you bring people along with you. Now you can only change yourself, right? You can only change yourself. But if there's an investment in improving a relationship, it's great to bring all the parties involved, right? When I teach the Dr. Joe stuff in my counseling stuff, I tend to do it in groups, and we'll have people bring their friends and families, because the more people you have, to me, it's easier to stick. Like if we live together, you know, we're sisters and we live together and we're both going through it. It's so much easier when I'm off to be able to lift you and be like, Scarlett, come on, choose a different thought. Right. And so to me, how you tilt. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Right. We both have. But the way that you till the soil, I think, is you spread the message wide. And you have to keep going back. You know this. It can't be a one-day training and we're all like lifted and like inspired. It's a way of life. And so you also have to like intentionally infuse this. I'm sure you have I know you do, you have your own individual practices, whether it's meditation in the morning, whatever the different things you do. Absolutely. And I have tried to bring that into the school, constantly working at doing that better. Right. I could go on and on. We could do a whole podcast on all the ways that we try to infuse this. Right. I try to bring it into like each session, right? Whether it's just starting with some heart focused breathing, whether it's like closing with that or different things, because you have to remind people to use the tools. And if you remind people enough, it becomes a habit and you don't know how to do it any other way. You just always start breathing before you start a meeting. You always do some heart focused breaths, right? So, but again, that collective community of more people involved, just so much easier to keep that energy up and keep the momentum going.
I choose love.
Hey there, listeners. Are you feeling the weight of the world? Well, you're not alone. The U.S. Surgeon General says nearly 50% of parents are overwhelmed by stress. And guess what? It's affecting us all. Just last year, we heard about an epidemic of loneliness hitting half our population, especially young adults. But there's hope. I'm Scarlett Lewis, founder of the Choose Love movement. We're dedicated to your safety, health, and well-being with proactive mental health strategies. Imagine a life where stress and loneliness are replaced by joy and connection. We've already reached millions with essential life skills to prevent violence, substance abuse, and mental illness. Want to join this life-changing movement? It's easy. Visit chooselovemovement.org today. Become a member, spread the word, and access our free resources. Together, we can create a loving, supportive community. Remember, all the nurturing, healing love you give comes back to you tenfold. Thank you for choosing love.
I choose love. I choose love.
Yeah, that's really good. And it is having that community and inviting people to your sessions. I mean, that is something that's a little bit novel too, but that that's very helpful. I know I know I need people around me, not just to uplift me and support me, but also to remind me. It's like a reminding thing too. So you have people that come in for therapy with you and then they leave after therapy. So how do you make sure that they continue on the path after that?
Yeah, it's a great question. So so I have a combination of both. I have some people who come into therapy, and I'll be, transparent that they come and they find that it's so helpful that even after I feel like that they've made some great gains, they want to continue. And it's not in a codependent way, right? It's not that I need, but it's more that this is just really useful to me and being able to always check myself and to be able to. So I have one camp of people like that. I have another camp of, that just life gets a little busy and they decide, I got this, right? And we leave that door open that you reach out if you need something. And, but what I hear, because periodically people will reach back. I had one person just last week who reached out because she experienced a pretty significant unexpected loss. And she said to me, JoAnn, I know what to do and I knew what to do, but I still wanted to talk. I just felt like I needed the space to talk, but I had the tools, and had I not had the tools, I don't know how I would have made it through what I'm navigating right now, right? So I think that to me, like, we've really done our jobs, right? Both in the school side and the counseling side, when we're not needed, right? And people are using it. Sometimes, I mean, I'm sad for her that she had to experience that, but I also was really happy for her that she had the tools. She absolutely knew she had them and she knew what to do with them. She knew she didn't need anybody from a codependent type standpoint, but she also knew that she could reach out for a lifeline just to be able to talk to her, because about the human connection and how powerful that can be. So she saw it more as a safe place, human connection. Let me talk to somebody who's going to get me, and let me just kind of express myself right now.
That's really beautiful. And sometimes you find yourself joining new communities. I mean, once you learn, and I'm talking about loss too. I mean, once you get to a certain level of understanding, once you have a significant tool belt, sometimes people that don't understand the way that you're dealing with things, and you might even find that there's some criticism because you're not doing it the way that you have been doing it, the way that they do it. And so you find communities that have your level of understanding, and that can help you move forward and are not trying to hold you back. I think that's really important too. And I love that she just, reaches out to call, because she knows that she might be in that situation, and she knows that you'll understand and love and support her along using the skills and tools in her grieving journey. That's so important as we kind of move along this journey together. I'm wondering what you see are the biggest barriers to getting mental health help, because I mean, so I know some of the barriers because I've heard them a lot, and their cost, they are access, their transportation. I mean, those are just set in stone. What are some other ones that you're seeing?
I would say the biggest one that I see is stigma. Biggest barrier that I see, right? I think that access,
Okay.
as far as, finding quality, services, or not being placed on a wait list, like, those are definitely barriers, right?
Yes.
And that's one of the things that I've recently started to do, is try to promote the business, because it's all telehealth what I do. So you don't drive by and see a building, right? So you don't see a building that says, so it's trying to get the word out, right? So I do think that there's a lot of great places out.
Could you access you from anywhere?
Well, for insurance purposes, no. Like, so folks need to use insurance. Like, I'm licensed in New Mexico, so it has to be in, like, New Mexico clients. But that I think is a big barrier. Sometimes people finding a therapist, right? And there's
And by the
ways.
way, I've used therapists that are outside the state because I haven't been able to find therapists in my state. And literally, it's, I mean, I'm a huge believer in therapy. I've been in therapy my entire life. And often I pay out of pocket
Yeah,
because it's that important to me. I mean, it's my mind, it is
right.
my sanity, it is, everything in my life is impacted by my mental health. And I understand that investment in my thought process is so important. It impacts me as a parent, as an entrepreneur, as, somebody that helps other people as well, putting my own oxygen mask on. So I just want people to that are listening out there, that are in other places in the country, like, JoAnn can be accessed from different states, because you are really one of a kind that
Thank
I
you.
know that offer such incredible services with, I mean, you have your own story, but you have been really researching and living this for so long now that it's embedded in everything that you do. And there aren't many there. I don't think, as a person who has been in therapy my whole life, I don't think that there are very many therapists that have combined the education piece with the therapy piece, and are ready, if you're ready to actually, be, feel, and do better. If you're literally on the journey to becoming the best version of yourself, and you want to do that for yourself and other people, like, I don't know anybody better than to do that with than you. So I
Thank
just
you.
wanted to get that out there. Yes. But as far as stigma, yeah, you were talking about that.
Yeah, so two things, but one I'll say, part of what, like, I'll go back to something that you were saying just now, and then I'll talk about the stigma, but one of the things that I am trying to do with the agency is train therapists in the methodology, like the approach, train my therapist in heart math, train my therapist in like the Dr. Joe methodology, because as you know, like there's only so much bandwidth that I have, right? So by bringing in therapists, it's no different than at the school. There's a way that I believe that teaching has to happen, right? But I can't teach every child, right? I can't. And so it's really having a training program so that the model of how we do education is expandable to like all classrooms, and it's not just my classroom or my, right? And so that's the same approach I'm trying to take with the agency, is so that it's not dependent on me personally, although I do see folks, right? But that we can be sustainable as an organization, both on the school side and on the counseling side, so that what we know works. It's like what you do, Scarlett, with the Choose Love. You can't go in and just do this yourself, like in a school, right? So now you're trying to bring it to schools, expand the message so that other schools are spreading your message and stuff through the way that you teach it. So kind of similar concept. But back to the stigma, I
Yeah.
think that, well, we mentioned access. I think telehealth, like that's the one thing I think that helped during COVID, right? Is telehealth became a thing. It wasn't really a thing so much before COVID. And I think that that's made it much more accessible. You don't have to worry about the transportation by being able to work with somebody remotely. But the stigma to me is the biggest thing that stops people from treatment, right? Because I think that, I mean, I even experienced this myself, right? Like thinking that to get, when I first got divorced, I know my family was like, my sisters were like, you need to talk to somebody. There's something wrong with me, right? Because there's this thought that like there's something wrong, or that you're broken, or you can't fix it yourself, right? And when you grow up not depending on people, right, you kind of are like, I'm gonna have somebody else fix my problem. Like I will figure this out. I don't need somebody else, right? So I think the stigma is real. I'll tell you, I find the stigma with both men and women, although I do find it a little bit more with men, right? Because they're taught, a lot of people, there's the stigma that therapy is all, how do you feel?
Mm.
And how do you feel? Right? We've seen too many movies like that. And it's not that there's not a component of that, right? Like kind of get in touch with how do you feel, right? But
Awareness.
yeah, but that's something that sometimes is really different. I hear this from a lot of the men that I work with, is that it's really different. And I'll be transparent. Sometimes I work with the justice system, and so I get a lot of folks who are coming from probation or things of that nature, and so sometimes they're forced into therapy as kind of a condition. But I'll tell you that those are a lot of times folks who will stay in therapy even after the requirement is done, because they're like, JoAnn, this has completely changed my life, right? And so, the stigma is a huge part of it. It's a huge part of it, I think, like with folks, all the messaging around. And also think about a lot of times in many homes, right? You're told you don't talk about what happens outside of this house, right? So like therapy defies what we've been taught, is you don't air your dirty laundry out there, right? And even though it's confidential and all that, like you don't go talking about your stuff. And with a lot of cultures and with men, right? Sometimes it's seen as a sign of weakness to talk about what's wrong and the problems. Like, suck it up, put your big girl pants on, your big boy pants on, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so there's a lot of stigma that goes with, I think, therapy. And so I think sometimes it takes a lot to get somebody to start. And I've told you, some of the clients that I feel like I've had the biggest breakthroughs have been forced into therapy and then eventually just saw that it was a game changer for them, right? But I don't know if they would have accessed it had that not been for that forced circumstance. So sometimes that's that silver lining of something that seemed really awful in their life.
Right, right. That made them reach out for help.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, how does, I mean, we've talked about Joe Dispenza and Heart Math. How does Choose Love inform what you do in transformational journeys? Because I know that it informs a lot in the school. I mean, I've been down to Albuquerque and visiting MAS, both campuses, countless times. You guys are my family now. I drive into the parking lot and I've got educators running up to my car, giving me a hug and everything. It's absolutely amazing. But I'm wondering, how do you use that outside of the classroom? And so, and what connections are you able to make with maybe some students that you're counseling and using Choose Love in both places?
Yeah, so with the Choose Love, so interestingly, I don't have any of our students part of the agency. And part of that is just I've tried to keep a little bit of a separation there. I could easily put the information out. I just wanted to be mindful, like, do you know what I mean? Of like so I haven't really put it out. Not that we would necessarily turn somebody away. I wouldn't see them personally, but I haven't really promoted within the organization. But with that said, I reference the Choose Love with I don't think that there's a single client that I've worked with that I haven't brought it up, because look well, you don't see behind you, but like, your background, courage. A lot of the clients, like, courage is a huge part of anybody's journey, right? You got to have the courage, like kind of feel that fear and do it anyhow, like face that fear head on, right? Courage. It takes courage to leave an abusive relationship. It takes courage to stop drinking. It takes courage to choose a different thought and to choose a different behavior despite feeling the anxiety. It takes courage to get help. I mean, go on and on. So I reference that, right? I'll skip for a second just to the forgiveness, because so many people that I see, forgiveness is a huge part of their work, whether it's forgiving themselves for something that they have done that they can't seem to let go and they want to punish themselves for the rest of their lives. If it's forgiving themselves for like the things that were unsaid before a family member passed, right? Forgiving an ex for the harm that they did to them.
Yeah.
Forgiving, this comes up so often in therapy, right? Sometimes I see this as a big obstacle to people's healing, is the ability to forgive somebody, right? Compassion, right? A lot of times, like, our work will have to do with like seeing other people through the eyes of compassion, right? Recognizing that you can't change other people. Like, let's view them from the eyes of compassion. That doesn't mean you don't set a boundary, but we can't perseverate on what other people are doing and what they should be doing, right? And it's approaching that person with some more compassion. So your work comes up all the time. I have referenced your book. I cannot tell you I think probably every client that I've worked with, right? And we talk about this, and I often will, it's not just with clients who have lost somebody, but I have a number of clients who have lost somebody very, very close to them, a child, a number of clients who have lost a child, right? And so I often will reference, because they're struggling with all those components, like that self-forgiveness, the forgiveness of the person who killed them in the car accident, the forgiveness of the friend who gave them the drugs, right? It comes up all the time. And so to me, it's such a powerful, your story, your book is a real healing tool, I think, for a lot of people. So I bring the choose love up and your story and the different things, the signs, Scarlett, that you talk about in the book, right? The signs you saw from Jesse. A lot of times that I'll talk to clients about, I'll always ask them, tell me where you are on your beliefs, right? I don't want to ever impose my thoughts or beliefs on people. But a lot of folks do believe or they want to believe, but they get so much healing from that when we could talk about that. When we could talk about let's talk about the signs that maybe you've gotten, and when we get them to celebrate the person's life and all the memories. And so, oh, the choose love in your book and the work, I reference it because, as I told you, to me it's an educational part, right? It's as much as education. I can talk over and over and over again about their grief and about their pain and about their grief and about their pain, but at some point in time they have to have tools to move forward, right? They're always going to have some of that grief, right? Learn to live with that, like learn to wake up. You talk about this, wake up and forgive. They might have to do this more than once, right? More than 100 times, right? But they need those tools. They don't need me to just hear them. Yes, there's a time and a space to be heard. Let me just dump everything that's on my mind, right? But at some point in time, you have to get people out of the story, because they'll stay stuck on the story and you can't have somebody tell you the same story 100 times. To me, like, I'm not doing my job if they keep telling me the same story, right? I got to give them tools to move beyond. The story will be the story, right? But they got to have tools to move on so that they're not stuck there.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And they have to know that it's possible. People
That's right.
don't know what they don't know. And
that's right.
This is so powerful. So let's talk for a minute about the power of character and social emotional competence in therapy, because I don't think that anybody has ever, that I know of, have never combined the two. And so what does that look like? And why do you think that that is? I mean, for me, I think that's the absolute most powerful combination. That's why I'm so excited about transformational journeys. But how do you do that in your sessions? And why does that make your sessions different than somebody else's sessions that are just, doing the traditional therapy or counseling?
Yeah. So again, at the risk of being redundant, it is
going to be a little redundant. But I think that if you say it a different way, it just lands.
That's right. Yeah, it lands.
This is different, and it's so important.
Yeah, it goes right back to the educational component, right? Scarlett, let's start with the courage part, right? Recognizing that we have the fear, we trigger that limbic brain, right? That emotional brain and stuff, like that chemical brain. And then, we respond and we react from that place, right? It's an emotional reaction. So social emotional intelligence, right? To me, it starts with education. I can tell somebody on and on and on about, like, oh, you need to do this. When people understand, and when they understand that when you go to make a different choice, oh, it's going to feel uncomfortable. It's going to feel so uncomfortable, right? When you tell them it's normal to kind of feel those butterflies, like when you're about to do something different, when you start to explain that process from an educational standpoint, it shifts. I use, you talk a lot about, like, all the dose, you go over the dose, right? The dopamine, the oxytocin, the serotonin, right? Like you go through all that with folks, right? I do the same thing, because I explain to them that, do you want your body to swim, all your organs and all your cells to swim in adrenaline all day long and cortisol? Or do you want your body to swim in some of these feel good chemicals, right? And I talk about what that does to the body, right? And so when we talk about bringing the social emotional, it's not just, because it's not just positive thinking, right? It's far more than that, right? But to me, it's the educational component. You got to provide the education on this, and then you got to break it down into steps. In the curriculum in the school, right? You teach a brave pose. You talk about what that does. You teach a brave breath, right? It's no different in therapy. I just, I spoke with a client this weekend, and we started, she's much more open to meditation now. She wasn't really she was a little resistant. You got to meet people where they are. So I'll keep bringing it up, and I'll say, I'm gonna bring it up, and you can just tell me, JoAnn, we're gonna put that on hold, and that's cool. But at some point in time, you're gonna come back to me and you're gonna say, JoAnn, I'm ready to try, right? And that's what happened. Like, she's ready to try. She's like, I can't take this anymore. I can't sleep at night. The mind goes. And I'm like, you want to fix the racing mind? We got to do something. We got to rewire. And you don't rewire without some real intentional work around that, right? But it's the educational part to it. So sometimes, I think that it can take longer sometimes. And I remind people, we live in a world of instant gratification. I could order from Amazon and there's a chance it would arrive at my house tonight, because now you can get same day delivery sometimes, right? So I talk about, in the world of instant gratification, sometimes we have to remember how the brain wires together. And if we understand that, then we understand like that it took some time to wire this way.
That's
And
right.
it's going to take some time and consistent repetition to unwire the brain, right? And to rewire it in a new way. So, going back to the question then, so how do you infuse it? Every session, every time. And we try to find the one or two things we're going to work on, and we commit to plugging away at that and stuff. I tell my clients, the clients who are willing to read and do work outside the sessions, they grow the fastest. Because I tell them, you get 1 hour with me on average. Let's say that we meet 1 hour a week, right? 52 weeks in a year, right? That's not a lot of hours. Like, if you consider 365 days, that's 8,760 hours in a year, right? If you're meeting with me 1 hour a week consistently, you still have 8,708 hours left to deal with yourself. So I tell people, you got to do some work outside the session. Like, it's great if you end and you feel uplifted, you feel good, but that's got to sustain, and you can't wait for me to get there. You got to do the work, right? And so it's really intentionally using the tools, explaining the tools from the educational standpoint of like, why does this work, right? And then getting the commitment. And I do think that when people understand why it works, they do it. I'm telling you, the clients that I've done this with, and like, we've done the heart mount, the Joe Dispenza, both, right? When I explain breathing, nobody resists anymore when I say, let's breathe for a little bit, because it seems like you're a little amped up. Let's go ahead. Let's just take some breaths, right? There's zero resistance, because they know what it does to them.
Right.
And then I ask them, tell me why we did the breath. What did that do for you, right? And they can explain it to me. It's less important. I tell people, don't get all caught up in what part of the brain, and it's less important. I want you to more have the big picture of understanding what this does to your body. But I think when people understand, they recognize that that's not good for me. When I'm amped up like that at a consistent level all the time, especially for no real reason, it's all in my head. It's not like, I tell people, there's a dog chasing you. Yes, you want some adrenaline. You need to run, right? But if there's not a jog and it's just you sitting in your chair all stressed out, it's not serving you. It's really harming you at that point in time, right? And so again, the education, I just can't say enough about it. Like, that people have got to understand the why. And I think when they get that, there's so much more investment in doing the work.
And the education has to come from somebody that not only understands it kind of sort of academically and emotionally, but also lives it, because that's the only way. You modeling it and then helping somebody through it. And when you've used your own skills and tools through difficult times as well, so important. So, JoAnn, where can people find you? And I know there are going to be people that want to follow your journey and probably reach out to you. How can they do that?
So my website is mytransformationaljourney.com. And so they can find me on the website. Also have social media now. And so I can get that to you after, Scarlett. And they can follow on social media. And but yeah, I'd love to connect with people, whether it's on the counseling side of things. Folks are interested, any of your educators who listen to this that just want to understand more about how we do this in the school, I'm happy to share that. I always tell people I'm very grateful over the years for people who have shared resources with me, whether it's from the school side of the world or the counseling side of the world. And I try to approach it that it doesn't matter if you work at our school or you're at another school, if you're with another counseling agency or you're associated with my agency, if we're able to share these tools to help people, then we're all in the same journey of elevating consciousness, right? Like improving the lives of people. And so I don't think it matters where you do the work. Like I'm really all about trying to share the tools, and always grateful for people who have shared things with me over the years. So happy to do the same.
I love making Choose Love connections with extraordinary leaders. And those of you who know me know I talk about courageous leaders all the time because they're actually fairly few and far between in my experience. And you are absolutely one of those, JoAnn. I mean, I consider you a dear friend, and we've been connected now for over 10 years. I'm so grateful for all that I have learned from you. And so thanks for being on this podcast. And I want this to be the first of many. Everyone, listening, JoAnn really is an incredible example. And that's backed up by what she's been able to accomplish in her life. So, and she means it when she says, definitely reach out. We will share the social media. We're going to get connected with you, JoAnn, and we're going to share your posts and do all of that. We're just real excited. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for choosing love from the very beginning. JoAnn was one of the first 4 schools in the world. Now we're all over the world, but this was, a new curriculum. It was just coming out. JoAnn Choose Love has me come down. I mean, it was really kind of in the very beginning stages, and you believed in us. And, I really appreciate that. And we're still going strong. Now, MAS charter schools are the first certified schools in New Mexico and the second in the absolute world. So still, showing incredible leadership. And I'm so grateful for you.
Thank you, Scarlett. Feelings 100% mutual. Thanks for allowing me to be part of this, and look forward to our continued work together. And thank you again.
Yeah, me too. Okay, thanks.
Hey, hey, oh. It's all part of us. We can all choose love. It'll lift you up if you let